So let's get started. And I believe we're recording. So we'll start here. I've got some slides to kick us off. So let me try to share my screen. And hopefully this will work. And we will, hopefully else can see my screen. And here's our slide deck. So welcome everybody. This is the photo review with NAPfS. We still have some folks coming in. So NAPfS is the North Austin Photographic Society. Oops, hang on, as I figure out how to work Zoom. So NAPfS is the North Austin Photographic Society, and the group is on the web at napfs.org. NAPfS is all about educating, inspiring, and motivating photographers of all levels. It's a photo club that has 85 members currently. There's also an active Facebook group. You don't need to be a member to post or read to that, so you may want to check it out. It's Pflugerville Photographers, and I put a link there to that. So a little more about the club. We have regular meetings. If you look, there's Thursday meetings that are outlined on the website. We also have a lot of great guest speakers. There's like lighting, technical demos, marketing, different kinds of shooting. We've done portraits, we've done, still lives, wedding photographers, just all kinds of guests will come and talk to us. It's always changing. It's sort of an ever-changing roster of guest speakers, and they've been really great in the past, and I'm sure we'll have some great ones in the future. So keep an eye out on the website also for the guest speakers. Another part of the club is that we also have monthly competitions to encourage folks to share work. And this photo review is actually modeled after the monthly competitions. So normally on the monthly competitions, what happens is we have a panel of judges, and we'll sit down and we'll look at the work. I'm not always on the panel, it rotates. I have been a panelist before, but it will rotate. So every month there's 3 or 4 judges that will look at the work and critique the work. And then we have a meeting where we get together, and the competition is divided into categories. It's sort of beginner, intermediate, advanced. And so that way a beginner is not, competing against an advanced photographer. And then what happens is the judges will critique and discuss the work, and they give out awards and things. And then next month in December, I think there's the photo awards for the year. So usually the last month of the year, we do the awards to highlight the work through the year that was done. So if you are a photographer, the next meeting will be a virtual Zoom meeting on December 3rd at 7 p.m. And as I mentioned, that's our yearly awards meeting. And the first competition of the new year will be in January. And that's usually an oldies theme. And what we mean by oldies is that normally for competitions, we ask for newer work. We ask you to submit newer work. The idea is we want you to shoot new work for the competition. But for this one, you can put something you shot a long time ago. So because older work is allowed, you can enter in January and show off something you're really proud of, or some such thing. And so that's one way to kind of get into the competition and show some of your past work. If you are a gallerist or curator, NAPfS does shows at Pecan Street Coffee House regularly, and sometimes at the Pflugerville Library. They're also interested in doing additional shows around town. They're also actively, I mentioned there's a lot of guest speakers. They're also always actively looking for new guest speakers, additional speakers. So please reach out if you have a connection or you think you know someone who would be a great guest speaker. The group was written up in the Statesman by Ariana Garcia. She did an article on the club for the newspaper. You can read that link from the main website, napfs.org, as well. So today's format, I mentioned, we'll just be going over images the club members have submitted. It's very similar to our competition images. We won't be scoring, but we'll just be discussing the work. Just think of this as, we think of this as this is the best thing to do, because really when you look at work and talk at work, it improves your photography as well. Each of the photographers will have a chance to speak about their images and their image making process a little bit. And feel free to ask questions of the individual photographers, or at the end, we'll have time for just a general Q&A if anybody has any just general questions. So just a little bit about me. It's a little confusing because I'm on the studio tour, but this is NAPfS group. So my name's Carol. Hi, I should have introduced myself earlier, actually. I'm from Carol's Little World. My name's Carol Schiraldi. I'm a fine art photographer, and I usually say that when I talk about work because I usually critique work and discuss work from a fine art photographic standpoint. Photography has a lot of umbrellas and encompasses a lot of different types of work, styles of work, genres, and whatnot. So I definitely come from the fine art background. I started shooting architecture, but now shoot a lot of varied subjects. For the club, I've been a guest speaker, and I've been a competition judge, I think a few times at least now. I want to say maybe 3 or 4 or even more times. I'm not quite sure, but probably will again at some point. This year I was lucky enough to be accepted into the Austin Studio Tour, and I wanted to share the work that the club was doing with the folks on the tour. So I thought it would be a fun thing to do to set up a kind of a Zoom call and just have some folks from NAPfS come and present their work and just have kind of informal chat about our photography and just photography in general, and add more photography to the studio tour, because there's a lot of paint slappers and sculptors, and this year there's a lot of sort of odd performance art. I've been calling it peeping Tom art, right? There's all these people doing work in their window and people are sort of going up and, oh, look at that, right? Well, we're photographers, so we can share digitally. So I thought it would be good to bring this work to the tour, and likewise bring the tour to this work and kind of get us all together. So that's how we got here. And I just wanted to give a very brief special thanks to Big Medium and all the folks, excuse me, at Big Medium for all they've done. They've really have done a lot. This year with the COVID, it was really very difficult. They had a lot of challenges, a lot of obstacles. A lot of people were just stressing and not knowing what to do, and there still is a lot of confusion, but they really pulled off a great tour. If you get a chance, look at the Austin Studio Tour website. It's phenomenal. The work is great. They really did a wonderful job. They support the local arts and artists in Austin really very well. So just big thank you to Big Medium folks. And if you get a chance, please check out that work. So now let's look at the work. And I am going to try and pull up the website. And of course, usually the better the work, the harder it is for this to work. So let's give it a second and see. Here we go. Okay. This is my screen. And we're going to start with, so hopefully y'all can see my screen. Is that looking good?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, awesome. So this image is Georgia on My Mind, and it's from Carol. There's more than one Carol in the NAPfS group, so sometimes we feel like we're talking to ourselves, but hi, Carol.
Hi.
Great to have you here and on the tour. So this image, I absolutely love this image. Let me start by saying that it just has such a tranquil, peaceful mood. It really makes me feel like I'm in that this nice pocket between late summer and early autumn. It just has that seasonal quality and feel to it. When I first saw this image, I thought one of the photographers I'm a big fan of, especially right now, is a woman named Sig Harvey. She does this sort of narrative storytelling photography almost. And this really reminded me of a Sig Harvey image in a good way. I mean, it has that very strong narrative storytelling aspect about it. There's a quality to it that just is, it's almost hard to describe in words, but there's just, this sort of tells a real story. There's a lot of elements in this image. I love getting into the details of the image. I love the pose. I love how it's very relaxed. You know, you can see what the subject sees, right? You're looking from behind, which is, you're seeing what the person is looking at. So it's not only you're seeing their reaction, they're being relaxed and laid back, but you're also seeing what they're looking at when they're being relaxed and laid back. So it really adds a depth and a certain narrative quality to the image. I really love the pose. The water is great. There's sort of this wonderful reflections and light going on in the water. In the foreground, the T shape of the pier is just a strong visual element. It just has, it kind of has these leading lines that just pull you in and add some depth to the image. The gesture, it's one of those things, photography sometimes is very much about gesture, especially still photography, and the gesture of the pose is very strong in this image. The sky is really great. In this image also, all the corners and edges really work for me. The light is hitting in just the right spots. I cannot say enough great things about this image. I really love it. I think it's got that just great storytelling feel. It could be a still from a movie, or, you know, just it's got that kind of very tranquil, you know, end of summer vibe about it. So at this point, I'd like Carol to, you know, if you want to speak a few words about your image, please.
Yes, absolutely. This image is actually part of an autobiographical series that I shot on a trip through the South last fall in 2019. My husband and I generally take about 3-month-long trips per year, and that's where I get a lot of my work. And if you go to my website, I'm sorry for double posting it there in the chat room, but if you go to my website, you won't find this series or this image on there because the whole thing is still pretty much a work in progress. However, there's contact information for me, and I am, you know, certainly making prints of this provided to everyone. And one of the things that's kind of amusing for me about this particular shot is I titled it Georgia on My Mind. I had just left family in Georgia the day before, but we actually were in Alabama at this time, but I'm looking towards Georgia. So if that helps a bit. And of course, no idea that Georgia would be center stage in national politics, you know, certainly this time of the year. So it turned out to be really apropos. One thing that I like about this image, as Carol mentioned, is because you can't see the subject's face, or actually even one critique was not totally sure of the gender. It gives, I think, a real universal sort of appeal to the viewer where they can set themselves in the position of, you know, and be sort of lolling on the dock in this bowl of water and sky in this kind of sort of an endless late summer vacation. And so it's real serene and real evocative. I can see it, you know, large in like a sitting area, sort of providing a really serene setting, or equally well, I think, as, you know, a smaller, more intimate piece on, like, you know, a work at home desktop sort of arrangement, just to have something to look at, to kind of take yourself out of what all else is going on with your world. So it's a nice big file. I can make it all kinds of sizes, and I think it lends itself to all kinds of treatment.
Yeah, it certainly does. And then also the fact that you work in a series is really interesting, right? It's very compelling, because I think that also lends to the narrative, right? If you see this series, there's sort of a story there. So I really hope you continue with the series, and you know, maybe if a gallerist is watching, you know, that's another thing that, you know, I could see a one-person show of this kind of work, right? Because it's definitely as a strong, as it works individually as an image here, but also it would work very well as a series.
Yeah, and you've seen the series yourself,
Yes,
so
yes.
you have some idea of that. Yeah, thank you.
So great. Okay, well, thank you. So I think to go to the next image, I think I just close this one, and please bear with me as we go through the first ones. I'll get good at this, I promise. So next up we have Ed, and this is called Self-Portrait. So Ed is here with us today as well. So one thing that strikes me about this image, I immediately thought, I love this image because, well, I do a lot of architectural photography myself, but there really is sort of a playful geometry about this image. I really love like the lines and shapes in this. It's so playful, and it has so much depth. And even before you see, there's I'm going to try, I don't know if y'all can see my mouse, but I'm going to try and move. You can see Ed is in here himself. And, you know, it is definitely a self-portrait. But before you notice that, just the lines and the shapes and the grid really is very striking in this image. A lot of times photography is about the choices we make, both in the camera and in editing and in other times as part of the process. In this case, the square format, the photographer's Ed's use of the square format was really an excellent choice because it heightens that sense of geometry in the image. A lot of times, like I said, in camera editing and in presenting, in sharing our work, the choices that we make really reflect later on down the road the output we have. Photography a lot of times is as much about what we choose to leave in as much as, you know, what we choose to leave out as much as what we choose to include, right? So making something square puts emphasis on different places, and it's not always obvious to the viewer that that's what's happening, but that's a really good choice by the photographer. This is also a reflection. And so a lot of times with reflections, you have layers, right? You can literally shoot behind you, right? You can have eyes behind your head when you shoot reflections, right? Because there's sort of the layer that you're on, if you're looking through a window, for example, there's what's in the window and then what's behind you in the same image, right? So when you do that, it adds a lot of layers to the image. There's sort of what we see and what we see reflected, sometimes directly behind us. And photographs, by their nature, are flat, right? And so sometimes we have to work hard to overcome that restriction. We have to put a sense of depth back into an image to make it sort of compelling, right? And here, there's really a sense of depth by showing us the world through this sort of flat grid, but then having these lines and grids and patterns and reflections all coming, completing this playful geometry. So there's a beautiful sense of geometric pattern and shape and light and texture in this image. It's very graphical. The square format was an excellent choice. I think this is it's a playful image, but it's also a very strong geometrically. It's got some great lines and shapes in it. So having said that, Ed, if you would like to maybe speak a few words about your image.
Sure. Thanks, Carol. I appreciate it. Yes, I was in downtown Austin on the top of a parking building when I looked over and I saw this reflection and the distortions of the buildings and just the general geometry is what caught my eye. And so I, of course, decided to take a photo of it. When I submitted it to the club for the competition, I knew that I was in the photo. I mean, I'm reflected in the photo, but I was afraid no one would see it. So that's why I named it self-portrait, so that
was inspired. That I didn't see you until I read the title, and I said, "That's a great title."
Yeah, that's one reason why in our competitions titles can be very important, because they do convey part of the meaning of the photograph. So like I say, I was struck by it, and I did do a fair amount of editing on the photo. There was some traffic in the lower left that I cropped out, and I spent some time straightening the photo, getting the grid straight. So anyway, I appreciate the comments, Carol.
Definitely, it's really a great image with a lot of great, you know, the lines and the geometry is just so wonderful. It's playful, it's real, it's abstract. It's really a great image.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing it. Okay, so next up, I'm going to try. We're getting there. I'm figuring out how to work this. We have a wonderful system for competitions. It's just me who doesn't always know how to work things. So, and I've done so many Zoom calls this week. I think Zoom has a switch that says if Carol logs on, have a connection. So getting back to the work, this is called Sunrise at the Reservoir. This is from David, and he's on the call, I believe. This is a wonderful, moody image. Photography itself as an art form can be really evocative. Here we have just a beautiful sort of placement of the bird. In art speak, there's a term called juxtaposition, but it's really just the notion that we have, two things against each other, right? Putting things next to each other. Here we have the scale is really adding to the image, because we have this small bird that appears very small, and he or she is set against this large environment. And there's sort of a tension created from that scale, right? Because there's this little bird sort of taking off or landing on the lake, and yet there's this, giant background. It looks like mountains, compared to the scale of the bird. A lot of photography is about scale, because we already talked about how we sort of flatten things, right? Photographs are flat. And so a lot of times scale, absolute or relative scale, can set things apart and add depth back into imagery. Here we have the use of relative scale, right? We have a small bird in a large environment, right? And that really sets a mood to the image, right? When you see something small with a big, it makes you feel like there's a big universe out there. It makes you feel that vastness, right? That expanse. In this image too, the water is making sort of a stripe, like almost a horizon line. It's cutting through the image, and that's almost like a metaphor for how the water cut through the valley itself. And so the lines are sort of doing double duty in here. So even though this is a very simple, tranquil image, there's a lot going on. It has a lot of blues and orange tones, which are complementary colors. Again, that color palette, if you use warm and cool colors, complementary colors, that can also add that depth back into the image, right? Really adds depth, because the warm colors come forward and the cool colors recede. And that those combinations, whenever you have combinations in photography, like light and dark, warm and cool, small and large, small and expansive, it creates tension in the image. And that usually helps craft images that are more compelling. Because there's, you don't just look at them and glance at them. The great photographer Ernst Haas talked about the difference between looking and seeing, right? We want people to really see our images, not just look at them, not just glance at them. And a way to do that, a way to make more captivating imagery, is to put that tension in, put that depth in, make images that are more compelling. And here the photographer's really done that with this sort of depth and the color and the scale, relative scale. An interesting note about this, I grew up kind of near where this image was taken. I found out afterwards. One of my favorite photographers is a man by the name of Steichen, who shot an image called Moonrise at Mamaroneck. And it has a very similar tone and feel. It's sort of a moody, evocative image, and it was taken very near this image. So I thought that was really interesting, just to put it into historical content. So David, if you'd like to speak a few words to your image, please pop on.
Thank you very much, Carol. This image was shot as part of some photography I was doing for a book about the parks in Westchester County, New York. This shot actually did not make the book, but several others did. But it was one of a series that I was doing that came from getting up early and getting that morning sun, and just as it came up over usually hills, not always. The terrain in Westchester varies. It's hilly, but you get some open spaces, particularly around reservoirs. I love this image because it's so tranquil. Gives a sense of just the peacefulness of the area at that time of day. I'm enjoy doing that. There's actually 4 pictures that are taken from more or less the same spot, all of which are very different. But a number of them give that tranquil quality to it just because of the time of day. And so I think it would look well as part of an interior setup. I've become a little more aware of doing interior decorations as part of, over the last 20 years, I've done 6 or 7 interiors for places I've lived. And it would add very nicely to a mood in one of the living areas or a study area. or work area where one needed to contemplate that, what one was doing. So in sum, I think there can be a lot of enjoyment coming out of this. And I want to thank Carol and Big Medium for the opportunity of showing this image. And I'll pass it back to you, Carol.
Thank you. Thanks, David.
I have a thought. I just wondered if you had to come up with a creative title, Dave, and you had choices, what would you do? Would you care to come up with alternate titles that are more metaphor?
I hadn't quite thought of them. I'm not sure I'm ready to come up with something right now. I was thinking of changing the word reservoir to lake, actually. I hadn't quite figured out how to get the cormorant in there.
Well, that's what I was thinking about. For me, that's a significant little symbol to look at. I always think sunrise liftoff.
Well, actually, he's just drying. He was fishing, and cormorants do that to dry off their wings because they're not waterproof like most diving birds.
Is that right?
So he's just drying himself off in the morning sun.
Okay, well, that's literal.
One thing really cute that kind of goes with this image is, as I looked at it more, if you see down in the lower left in that lighter area, there's another bird.
Yeah, it's another cormorant.
There's another cormorant down there, and it's like, so it was like, oh, I mean, it was like so exciting to see it. It was like this little joke, almost, and you could even title it Two Cormorants and have people looking, but I mean, that's,
There's an idea.
The divorce of the cormorants. Is one of them's taking off.
They are separating, each going their way.
It's a beautiful image.
Thank you very much.
I love how sharp it is too. Sharp as well as misty.
Yeah. It's got that painterly quality, and yet it has a lot of detail in it. And so again, it's got that real and abstract in it. And I think photography at its best when it has the real and the abstract combined, it's really very powerful. That's the strength of the medium. I mean, being a photographer, I'm biased, of course, but that's how I see it.
No, and that's something that I work toward. I'm, at the early stages of being any good at it, but I like adding those abstract elements to the photographs and start with something very sharp and crisp and real, and then kind of modify it just to bring in a more general feel to it. So it's not specific to that scene. It becomes sort of a general statement of the world. Luckily, the mist rising off the reservoir helped me do that here without having to do very much work in post myself.
Okay. It's really a beautiful shot. So
thank you, Carol.
Thanks for sharing. And we'll go on to the next one. Let's see, I think it's this one. So this is Michele. And this is called Nectar Lover. This shot is a more intimate, scaled down, personal look at nature. In the last shot, we had that sort of expanse with the bird and sort of the almost mountains, valley in the distance. And this is a much more detailed, close-up, sort of macro view of the world. It's a beautiful shot of this bee just kind of doing his thing, right? It's got this wonderful painterly like backdrop for the action. And I do mean action because this really is an action shot as the bees, those wings and those knees, as we know, the bee's knees are moving around there. So it's hard to get these kind of shots where you can get a beautiful stop action combined with that painterly sort of backdrop for this. This image has sort of the great corners and edges that it's one of the things when I was learning photography, my photography teacher sort of drilled into me, like, watch your corners and edges and the rest of the picture will take care of itself. And I still hear those words sort of echo in my head. But this image has some great corners and edges. If you look at the lower right corner, the leaves are just perfectly aligned. in that corner, and the flower being sort of in the lower right corner just gives it that expand. I mean, you can tell with the repeated patterns in a blurred background that it almost feels like this field of flowers goes on forever, and you've got this detail, this close-up, intimate view of the bee. It's got a beautiful softness, a lovely soft light in this image, and it really is almost a rhythm to it because you can see the repeated flowers, there's repeated shapes. And that's another thing, a lot of photographers are sort of more rhythmic, they look for repeated shapes, and then they look for something that sort of punctuates or breaks that rhythm. And here we have sort of the repeated shapes of the flower and the nature, the expanse of the green, and the punctuation is really the bee sort of invading that, even though he belongs there or she belongs there, invading that environment and sort of breaking the pain of the repeated shapes. It's got beautiful soft light, beautiful repeated shapes. It's very harmonious. There's sort of a yellow tone to some of the backdrop, and then it's sort of a purple flower, right? So again, it's got sort of complementary colors, and using the blurred backdrop is a great way to, again, add depth to the image because you really get the sense that there's sort of a far away and a near, and that all the action is in the near piece where the bee is doing his thing. So this is just a beautiful light. It's a well-crafted image. I really have a lot, great things to say about it. Great job. It can be really difficult to do macro photography for those who haven't done it. If you're on the call or, other photographers, it can be difficult to do. It can be hard to get up close. So, kudos to the photographer for that. And Michele, if you want to say a few words. I don't know if Michele is on the call.
No, I don't believe she's on the call.
Okay. Well, it's a great image. We'll speak in her absence and just say it's a wonderful image, and thank you for sharing it. And
Carol?
Go ahead. Yes.
Jean Thomas is on the call, but she's not able to. She typed in the chat that she saw a golden spiral in the background.
Oh yes, there sort of is a golden spiral. It's sort of in here. So for those of you not familiar, it's sort of the Fibonacci golden spiral, which is a lot of people when they shoot, they will put a golden. They'll put something yellow in the upper left corner in the upper right corner, of an image, and they sort of spiral out from that. And that kind of makes it, if you have your circular patterns in an image, it can really keep the eye and make it be captivating. One of the great photographers, Ernst Haas, always talked about putting a figure 8 in his images, or an infinity sign, which is a figure 8 that's sort of sideways. If you make shapes in your imagery and you have the rhythm of your shapes forms patterns, that's something definitely to look for. But a golden spiral or an infinity figure 8 symbol are definitely things that, they keep the eye in the frame and really keep the viewer, looking in the frame as opposed to going out of the frame. Because a lot of times when you do macro work, what happens is you're focused on the flower and the bee, and you don't realize even with out of focus, the out of focus blurry stuff is contributing to the whole of the image. And so if you have lines or shapes or patterns that draw your eye off the image and out of the plane, the image won't work, even though it's out. You think it's out of focus, I don't have to worry about it. Sometimes it's just the opposite. It's more prominent and more prevalent in the image because it can sort of ruin the whole image, or it can make the whole image depending on how you work with it. So that's just something we to think about if you're doing, sort of that wall of blur behind somebody. It's easy to just think out of sight, out of mind. I don't have to pay attention to it. It's just blurry. It's not just blurry. You still have to make the shapes and the patterns and the lines work. And here you can see this sort of yellow repeated patterns in the blur that really contribute to the image. So it's just something to think about. So let me check the chat room really quick to see it, make sure I'm not missing everything. Oh, yeah, okay. Yes, okay. Okay. So we'll move along. Thanks for sharing, Michele. So I think this next one is Nick. I'll give it a second to come up. So this one is called Heck, Not Another Bird Photo, and this is from Nick. This is actually a lovely bird photo. There's a lot of birding folks in the group. They shoot, when I first started judging, a lot of folks would ask me, do you like bird photos, yes or no? And I never wanted to give an answer because I don't love bird photos. I don't hate them. I really just love good photography, right? So there's a lot of great work that's being done with bird imagery and wildlife imagery in the group. And this is clearly an example of that. I like to, again, I'm a fine art photographer. I'm not a wildlife photographer. I usually preface my comments with that. So if you are a wildlife photographer and you want to get pointers or tips from someone who is a specialist, the group has those people available. I'm not one of them, but I can help recommend them to you. My critiques and comments usually run along the lines of the artistic side of the house. Now, having said that, a lot of times we intersect, right? A good photo is a good photo. Whether it's a bird, a train, a plane, a person, good is good, right? What we like, what we like. And this is a lovely image. We have a lot of birders in the group, and as I said, and there's a lot of good birding photography in the group. One thing that really strikes me about this image is there's really great separation in the image. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times when you shoot things, if you have, sorry, I moved my computer there. If you have things that are in front of things or things on top of things, when you flatten the image, you get these blobs of shapes, and it's hard. The classic example is you have a tree kind of growing out of somebody's head when you do a portrait, right? And that would be an example of not having good separation, right? The objects are not separate in the flattened, in the resulting image. In this image, it's the opposite. There's excellent separation. The bird's wings, you can tell the bird is going up to the plant, but he's not, or she is not in front of the plant, blocking the plant, obscuring the plant, blending with the plant, right? It's very clear where the bird begins and ends and the plant begins and ends. The shapes are really interesting in part because that separation is really there. When you add the separation, when you have good separation in an image, it allows the shapes to be formed. Right, so in this image, you have that the ball of that flower is really like an orb or a ball or sphere. And the bird is very triangular, right? And again, that creates a tension because you have the round and the triangular, the pointy, and they're coming together, right? And then there's lovely texture in this image as well, right? The feathers and plumage on the bird, the spikes from the flower and the spike of the bird's beak, just lovely. Again, that's a great, combination. Also, again, the bird is that purple and yellow, and the flower is that red and green, right? So lots of complementary colors going on that really add depths and tones to this that really make a great image. A color plays a lot here, but just the shapes alone would make this a strong image. As photographers, a lot of times we think, oh, we can't change color, right? If this is a purple bird, he's going to be a purple bird. There's not a lot we can do. Right, but there is stuff we can do, like we can blur the background of an image, or we can change the lighting to work with the colors that we have. In this case, the photographer, the background is that beautiful soft green that really adds to the image, right? And that really lets the red on the plant and the purple and yellow on the bird sort of pop, right? It gives it that standout because the green just sort of, it's that, cool color that just fades into the background that lets the warm red and the vibrant purple sort of pop out. It's a lovely image. It's a great bird photograph, not just another one. The texture is really great. Like I said, I think it's got great shapes, great lines. And Nick, if you're on the call, maybe you'd like to speak a few words to your image.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Carol. Since I arrived in Austin, as you might be able to tell, I'm not really from around here. One of the things I've been fascinated with is the hummingbirds, which you don't get any of in England. I've been trying with limited success to photograph these in the back garden. And of course, the problem is if you want to freeze the wings and capture them, you have to use very fast shutter speeds. You have to use very high ISOs, which give you very grainy photos. So after much frustration, I turned up at a photo ranch near Fredericksburg, which specialized in doing hummingbird shoots. quite extraordinary place where there must have been about 200 hummingbirds buzzing around us. I've never seen that in my limited time here. And we set this up with a flower, which we seeded with some syrup with a little syringe, and set up the camera so that if we didn't have any flash guns, this picture would have been totally black. So we were in the shade under a tree with no direct light. We had a very small aperture of f/19. And we set up 4 flash guns on the flower and the bird, and 1 flash gun on the backdrop, which I note your comments on how beautifully blurred it is. The backdrop, which was 2 feet behind the hummingbird, was an out of focus picture of grass, which was mounted on an easel. And we had 1 flash gun on that, and we had 4 flash guns on different powers around the bird and the flower. And the result was that we could take this with a very low ISO in great lighting conditions, and it really made the bird and the flower pop. And I love the fact that we got the colours and the little detail in the feathering of the bird that you can see through the wings. And I also very much like the curve if you follow the flower round through the beak and down the back of the bird. So yeah, I like this one.
Yeah, yeah. It's a really beautiful image. It really is. You know, that I didn't know about the flash, the way you'd set it up, but I could tell the background was really, you know, lovely. You know, there's a great arch and great shapes in it.
Mm.
Yeah, the explanation there about the studios, the lighting is, yes, it doesn't show, and it looks like a very natural picture. So it succeeds, even though it took a lot of work.
Yeah, thank you.
To get it.
And yeah, hummingbirds are a very difficult, for those of you who are not photographers watching this, like, wow, like hummingbirds are really tough they just don't sit still. You know, we talked about action with the bee shot. Hummingbirds are definitely action shots as well. Even though it's beautiful stillness and lovely stillness and colors in this, this thing was moving around. So, you know, kudos to, you know, one of the good things about the group in general is that a lot of times our critiques are done by other photographers. So we know how painful it is, like, to get a hummingbird in, you know, without moving and without getting a blurry mess, you know.
Nick,
and so sometimes, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask Nick if he used burst mode or other kind of.
No, Clay, no, just single shots. And yeah, you know, these guys were around for a couple of seconds on the flower. I mean, I managed to get quite a few doubles as well, which I also liked. But no, just single shots, single flash syncs.
Tremendous.
And a better hit rate than I've ever had before with hummingbirds.
Yeah.
Amazing shot.
Yeah, it's really, really great, really strong shot, you know. Wonderful. So thank you for sharing it.
Can I point out something really quick? I'm sorry, I didn't realize it. I was going to say what a good job Nick did editing through these photos, because one of the things that you don't immediately see is that each of the wingtips has a part of the flower where they're almost like reaching, the leaf is reaching to one, and there's a tendril coming out that's reaching to the other wingtip. That's kind of a, you know, a tension that's there that is not like obvious, but what a good job he did editing to have gotten those elements right there that really add to the communication between the bird and the flower.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think the title could be upgraded with Carol's remark, you know, like flower embrace or something. To raise
so many bird on stick jokes in the photo club that I thought.
Yes, right. Yeah, let's be more metaphorical, and the titles will be another source of surprise.
It's got great position of the head of the bird too. Like that's another, I didn't really talk about that, but it's just the head with the beak and the wings and the, you know, it really, I mean, the bird is just all these wonderful triangular shapes, and the flowers is sort of this spiky ball. And it's just interesting that contrast of that. And then you've got the beautiful green background. It's just, there's so, you know, there's really simple elements in this photograph, right? It's circles, triangles, blurred background. And yet, as you can attest, it was really difficult to get all of those together in harmony, but you've done it here and you've created a beautiful piece. So, you know, kudos to you for that, and well done and well seen. So thank you for sharing it. Okay, so we're going to go to the next slide, next image. So this is Purple Joy from Susan Park. So this is a lovely floral image. It's got some great lines and great patterns in it. Again, this is also a very rhythmic image. It's got, repeating shapes and repeating patterns. A lot of times as photographers, we can look for repetition, and then something that breaks the pattern, right? In this case, we have sort of these purple flowers with then this sort of the green stems at the top that are missing sort of the flowers, right? So it's sort of this, think of it almost as music, a musical composition, right? There's a break in the music that really sets the image apart. And then also the depth of field here is really wonderful because you can still, again, there's some blur in the background, but you can still see the flowers and the repeated patterns coming through. So photography really is a lot like music, and we can repeat patterns in compositions. And that's another way. A lot of people are very rhythmic photographers, and that comes out in their work. Some people are more linear, some people are more abstract, some people tell stories, more narrative, and some people are more rhythmic. And I think the group has a variety of photographers, the way they see things. And so it's interesting, with a group the size of NAPfS, you can see all the different types of photography, people showing work and sharing work, and you get to see like someone who's maybe more rhythmic versus someone who has more of a narrative style. It's interesting to compare and contrast just even the images we've seen today, right? Some people are more the storytellers and some people are more about patterns and rhythms and patterns and things. And so it's just interesting to see how photography has such a broad umbrella and encompasses a lot of that thing, a lot of different styles. And it's interesting because in a group the size of NAPfS, we don't sort of force people to see things one way, right? I've been in groups before where they sort of inflicted one, like you either had to be narrative or you had to be, painterly. There was no other way of seeing things. And the group is very open to different types of interpretation and your interpretation of photography, the way you see the world. So that's an aside about the group, but just putting it out there. But getting back to this particular image, this image has a lovely sort of U-shaped curve to the flowers, that is a sort of arc of the flowers, which really keeps the eye and gives the composition sort of a movement, a flow, if you will. Eye movement in an image is really very important. A lot of times you can evaluate an image based on where your eye lands in the image and then where it travels to. Like, does it stay in the frame? Does it go around? Does it see different things? Is there an arch? Is there a curve? Is there an X? We talked about the figure 8 from Ernst Haas. Is there an infinity? And this sort of has that infinity, right? It goes back and forth and in and out. And that really keeps that sort of composition really keeps your eye in the frame and really makes a more compelling image. That can help add that depth back in and make the photograph sort of pop out at you. And because of that, the flowers in the foreground really look like they're popping out, right? They have that, because of the eye movement, I think it really does that, really makes things pop out. There's great detail in this image, and there's a wonderful interplay between the shapes and the lines, right? These flowers are very linear, and so there's a lot of great lines going on, and then also the sort of rounded shapes repeating. And then the soft background sort of blurring out into the background. There's also a wonderful quality of the light. It's a very soft, soft shadowish light, there's no harsh light here, which can make for a wonderful image. A lot of times the softest light makes for the most vibrant colors. And that's not obvious. A lot of people think if they go out in the sun in the middle of the day, they'll get the brightest color. Brightest day makes the brightest colors, right? And all the photographers, I see people shaking their heads and some of you laughing, and those are the photographers in the group, right? Because we know that it's actually the opposite, right? The softer the light, the more vibrant the colors most of the time, right? So this has some beautiful soft, probably shadow or diffused light that really contributed to the colors of the image. And beautiful natural colors. So great to see that. I don't think Susan is on the call, correct? So unless anybody has anything else to say about this image, I'll go on to the next one. If I can find the next one, bear with me for a second. Okay, here we go. I think that's coming up. This one is called Threads of Hope. I love abstract images. It's one of the things, as I become more and more a photographer, my work is becoming more and more abstract. It's just a personal thing. I just love abstract imagery. I love abstract photography. Having said that, all photographs are abstract. Some photographs are obviously abstract and some are not. Everything is, all photographs have a level of abstraction about them. It's just where you draw the line, right? Is it to the point where you can't recognize anything or you can? Is there an element of concrete in the image or not? We tend to forget that sometimes when we deal with abstract imagery. Really, some images just are more abstract than others. This image, I absolutely love this image. It has, again, we talked a lot about complementary colors, but this image has a sort of red and green, warm and cool. You know, there's the opposites really attract in the images. It's got the heat and the cool. It's almost like fire and water in this image. This time of year, especially, we're reminded how red and green are complementary colors, right? Because holiday season is coming up, and you know, there's no coincidence they made Santa Claus and everybody all red and green, because those colors really pop, right? And they get you to spend more money at the end of the year or what have you. But you know, they are complementary colors, and they do pop, and they do work in art as well as in commerce. But they do really stand out. In this image, there's this sort of beautiful teal color. It's reminiscent of water. I would guess that this is a fountain of some kind, but I don't really even need to guess that, right? We don't even need to go there. The format of this image is just wonderful. There's sort of these vertical lines, and there's 3 vertical lines sort of going to the bottom of the image, and there's what looks like an emerging flame coming out of the bottom of the image, and I just love that. Having things in 3, for some reason there's this weird rule of 3 in photography, like 3 things are better than 2, generally speaking, when you photograph. And so having these 3 lines, 2 together and 1 offset, really is a very strong visual element. And then just having those vertical lines sort of breaking the pane and going into the bottom of the image is very strong. This image is really close to my heart, and when I judge work or speak about work, I try not to impose my viewpoints and preferences on the work as a judge even, or just as a photographer in general. But I must confess, I really love a good abstract and a good gradient. And this image sort of has that gradient as well, because it's warm on the bottom and it gets sort of darker and cooler as it goes up to the top. It really has that beautiful dark tone, and then it looks almost like a fire emerging from the bottom. The other thing I love about abstracts is they can often have a sense of mystery, right? Because they're often open to the interpretation of the viewer, right? It's not as concrete, it's not as literal. I'm doing a book project right now, and one of the things my editor keeps saying is less literal makes for better. It's better because it's more open to interpretation. It's more metaphoric. And this image is definitely on that scale of less literal, right? I kind of suspect I know what it is, but it's a lot less literal. It's a lot less in your face, right? It's more abstract, mysterious, curiosity, you know, all of those words come into play. I like to call it circumstantial imagery, hints and allegations rather than hard evidence, right? It's not in your face, you know, who done it. It's more like, you know, hints and allegations, an allegory of sorts, right? It's subtle, and subtle goes a long way in photography and in the arts. And again, when you have something that's more subtle, it's open to more interpretation. So people will see in this what they choose to see in it. It's putting the interpretation more into the viewer's lap and letting them choose how they see it. Is this dark? Is this burning? Is this mysterious? Is this water? Is this fire? Is this a fountain? Is this not a fountain? Is this, you know, what are those lines? Are they threads? Or, you know, the title says Threads of Hope. You know, what does that mean, right? You know, there's just a lot of questions, and that can really, abstraction makes our brain think differently. There's all kinds of psychological elements to that. And that really engages the viewer in ways that, you know, sometimes realism does not as much. Of course, photography does blend the real and the abstract, and it's great to have our realists too. But sometimes a wonderful abstract goes a long way. And this can evoke different reactions from different people. You know, we're not all robots. Someone may see something totally different in this image and love it. Close to my heart, I love abstract imagery. I love what the photographer's done here. Great choices, great color palette, great tones, great mood. I love the sort of mystery about it, and I love the warmth and cool, the dichotomy of it. So I guess, Jim, if you're on the call, if you want to speak to your image, son.
Well, this happened one afternoon, I guess, when I was experimenting with my wife has a bunch of different types of glass that she used for stained glass, and different types of vases and everything. And so I was just, you know, moving things around, changing the lighting around to see what kind of images would come up, you know, and different types would come up depending on what I was focusing on. You know, I was using manual focus to change what really showed up, and changing the angles to just, you know, it just changed the textures and everything of it.
So there's light behind this is a glass, three-dimensional glass vase, and there's light coming through it on the left.
Well,
And what makes the orange?
There was a glass like ornament that had those threads coming up, and so that was I had that one interspersed with paints of glass. You know, one that had it was textured, and so it was a combination of textures. And
I love it. Did you try other pictures like this, and maybe you could share those another time?
yeah. I mean, some of them, you know, some were less successful than others, but.
This is really a great image because you can see, like, if you just look at the bottom, it looks almost like a mountain range, like a volcano erupting or something, right? And then if you look near the top, it looks almost like water. And then you've got the lines going on, and, you know, you got vertical and horizontal lines. And there's just a lot of things you can see in it. And so this is also an image that I think would work very well, both blown up really big or kept small and intimate. It's just the colors are really interesting. It's just a wonderful, I think this is a very strong image. I really like it. Thank you for sharing it with us. And I would definitely encourage you, if this is an environment you can play in some more, to definitely, you know, do more like this, because, you know, this is wonderful work. Thanks for sharing with us.
Thank you.
And then if there are no more questions, I'll go to the next slide. Okay, I think we have one last one. And let's see, this one is Gary. This is called Wisp. So my first reaction to this photo was drama. Hello, this is a very dramatic image. It's really a beautiful black and white image. Let me get my notes, hang on. We talked a lot already today about choices that the photographers make. Right, we make a lot of choices when we're in the field, when we're in with our camera, with our editing and stuff. In black and white, especially when you work with monochromatic imagery, this is especially true. So very much depends on the choices you make, and you can really see the hand of the photographer and the result of the choices they make when you work in black and white. The lights, the tones in this image are very strong. The vertical format makes this very strong, almost masculine line right? It's a very strong, like sort of in your face format. And then the sky is this wonderful, it's got this sort of gradient, right? And there's light clouds in, and then the mountains, the foreground, you know, with the shapes, the curves of the earth there are just lovely with the light hitting them. And then of course the elephant in the room, dancing around with the lampshade, that beautiful cloud that just looks like angel wings going up to the heavens, right? I mean, it's just every choice from the photographer is contributing to this image. Really, the lines in the earth going to the darker corners, it just pulls you in, and it's very dramatic. It's beautiful. There's beautiful tones in this image, which is very critical. A lot of times when people, especially when they start doing black and white, and I've done this myself, you end up with what I call muddy boot prints. They're basically just, people are laughing at me because the photographers again are going, yeah, I've done that before, right? They're just, there's no black, there's no white, everything's, you know. I have a good friend of mine was talking about Bose headphones, and he says, I hate Bose. He says, no highs, no lows, that's Bose. And it's sort of like, that's how some black and white photography can be if you do it wrong, right? It's no white, no black, just sort of this muck of gray. And this image is the opposite of that, right? There's beautiful blacks, beautiful whites, beautiful grays, beautiful tonal range, beautiful depth. It just has a beautiful feel to it. It's a very sort of metaphoric image with that sort of wisp of cloud rising up to the heavens. Looks almost like angel wings, but there's some beautiful texture and there's beautiful interest. And then again, the choices the photographer make, the hand of the photographer is very visible to me in this image, right? A lot of times we discount that. We think, oh, you just took a photo of, you know, a mountain or something, and you don't realize how much that photo reflects our vision, our view, our hands as artists. Especially if you're new to photography, or maybe you're not a photographer yourself and you're watching this. The photographers make a lot of choices, both in camera, in editing, in post-processing, and in just going black and white, in the formats we use, in the way we see things. And our photographs end up looking like our voice, our vision, and the photographer's really done that here, right? This is really a unique vision. The cloud is very set off dramatically. There's a beautiful contrast in this image, right? With the blacks being dark, the whites being white, the sort of glowy cloud that's got a beautiful shape. Again, it's sort of a shape breaking a plane here, but wonderful choices, wonderful drama. In this image, great. I think it's a very strong black and white image. Great choices, and you can really see the hand of the photographer. And I think I do some painting as well. So one sort of little story about that. A lot of times when people start to paint, their vision comes out very clearly, very quickly, right? Studies have shown 3 paintings in, you have a style, right? Photography is the opposite. We get technique sort of more quickly, and then our style can sometimes take decades to emerge. Right. This image looks like the photographer really has a style. It's either emerging or starting to emerge. I mean, you can't tell without looking at a body of work, but it's clear that this photographer had a vision, and it wasn't just, I was playing around and I hit a few filters and decided to try black and white and got a muddy print. This is sort of the opposite of that. This is very clearly a vision that the photographer had of making this cloud really stand out and the sky and the earth look a certain way. So it looks very deliberative, very, very contemplative, very, designed, curated, if you will. So that's a wonderful trait to have in a black and white image, right? Ansel Adams talked about pre-visualization, the idea that you see something before you manifest it with your hands as a photographer. And this has, I think, some of that in some ways, because it's got some of the, some of the lines and the way the color and the tones are hitting it. It's definitely thought out. It's not the photographer did not bump into this like a Roomba, right? It was carefully seen and brought to life, brought to vision. So kudos, props, well done. And Gary, if you're on the call, if you want to speak to your image some, is he here?
No, he's not here.
Okay.
I wanted to say two things, Carol. One is that we have a theme coming up for the club, and the theme is curves.
Okay.
It's I can't, maybe Ed can help me, but it's like March or May or one of those. Anyway, curves, and this would place highly in that category, in that theme. The second is, of course, you mentioned before the look at the corners, and this is heavily vignetted with some post-processing. And then even a third point is like, I keep looking for a belly button in the shape of the hills. Anybody see a belly button?
No, I see the back. Looks to me like the back with a bit of rump in it.
Yeah,
But it definitely looks alive.
yeah, yeah. Where are the trees?
Where are the trees? Where are the trees?
But it's an arresting, attractive image.
Yeah, it's very high
This is-
drama.
This is also an image that
Yeah.
you just, for me personally, I just really long to see this in print.
Yeah.
You know, that just, you know, see, and that could be just because I have a you know, a background of having done black and white printing and, you know, getting wonderful tones on fiber or paper and that sort of thing. But this one just has a real textural kind of quality to it that, you know, to me wants to see it like live, you know, in person, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. So I put my computer up on a box and I keep hitting it off my box. Sorry about that. So, well, I think we've come to the end of our imagery. Let me go back to our slides and see if I don't think I had anything else for us. I mentioned, I put some websites up. I guess here, let me do this. Here's some website information. NAPfS.org is the group's website. My website is carolslittleworld.com, and austinstudiotour.org is the website for the Austin Studio Tour, which this will be a part of on the YouTube channel in the coming months. This will probably be up for a few months. So again, you know, if you're watching this in March and we've already had some of the competitions we mentioned, keep checking back on the website because we do always, the group is very active and very dynamic, and we add a lot of things all the time. There are new competitions every month. We have normally, I did a lot of yapping this time, but normally there's a panel of judges and it rotates, right? So it's not always the same people. And so you get a lot of feedback across a different variety of photographers. And it's just a great way to get feedback. It's great to see the competition imagery, just to see what other folks are doing and to share in that. And I guess with the last few minutes, maybe we can just open it up. I'll stop sharing my screen and maybe we can just open it up and have a little conversation. I think some folks are up. We had some folks putting their, so for those of you who haven't put their info in the chat room, please do so now. If you want to put it in again, that's fine. Feel free to post your, I'm asking the photographers to put their info in the chat session. And those of you viewing this, feel free to click through to the photographers' websites or note their email. Most of the work that I think all of the work you've seen is available in print form. If you do want to purchase a print or inquire about a print, you can either contact me, the club, or the individual photographers, and we'll get back with you on that. So having said that, I guess I'll turn it over to the floor if anybody wants to. I guess maybe one question would be, how did it feel sharing your work? We can put that out to the folks who participated today. You know, what was it like sharing your work as part of the Austin Studio Tour?
I thought it was great. Really nice. I mean, there's the photos there were really good.
Yeah, nice
you know,
forum.
personally, I have had a chance now with the dry run, and then we did some series stuff for the group thing on Thursday night. And I think it's really good for me particularly, and I don't know how true this is for everybody else. Probably a lot of us, I suspect, are not that comfortable with talking about our work. And yet if we want to have people look at it, have people purchase it, you know, or just have a conversation with another photographer about what we're doing, it's something that it really takes practice. You know, it's not natural. I mean, I'm a talker, you know, and it's not natural to be introspective necessarily about our art. And in going to the studio tour over kind of the years and talking to other artists kind of specifically about this thing, is that's a challenge for a lot of artists, is to be able to talk about their art, whatever medium they may have. So having this opportunity for doing it with the club, I think has been really good, at least for me.
Yeah, it took a good bit of prep for me to kind of work up a set of points that I might actually want to present about what I was showing, because as Carol said, it's not the norm for me to talk about the work or to think about why I did X or Y, or so. It's good practice to move a little closer toward, I don't know, a pitch mode or a selling mode, or something where I could explain myself to a non-photographer and
Yes.
do more than just have the work say whatever it says and be done.
That's so true. A lot of people these days really want to hear the story behind the work. And that's a big part of the studio tours. Like when they did the East Austin studio tour, especially like people would go to artist studios and they'd want to know like the story behind, how did you become a photographer? How are you, what is your work about? Tell me, show me, tell me. And it's really connecting with people. A lot of times, even selling art, like I'm becoming a retail artist. And one of the things I notice is I'm not really a retail artist. I'm really connecting with people. That's what's happening, right? I'm doing a lot more talking and sharing and discussing work and putting my work in ways that people can talk about it and share it. And that's really the way, that's really the art community, how it builds and how it fosters and how you develop as an artist. Because a lot of times you get feedback. Just doing this process, you'll get feedback, which will then improve your imagery. I can't speak to everyone, but in the past, when I've done things like this with my own work, it's made me think about my work in new ways. And then when I approach my next round of work, I'm thinking about it differently because I had the opportunity to speak about it, or I speak about other people's work, and it gives me insights into my own work. So I think it's kind of great growth for an artist. I hope it was valuable for the folks who did it.
Yeah, it's hard for me. I did not grow up as an artist. I have had absolutely zero art education going back as far as junior high school. And so the vocabulary does not come naturally to me, and the concepts are a little alien. I'm still trying to figure out where I'm going to get some education to enhance the capabilities and the vision, really, because I'm beginning to bump up against that. I see things that I want to do, and I know there's knowledge out there about what they look like and techniques and things like that. And so having to do this is very good for beginning to round that process out a bit.
Yeah, it really is.
I find it quite valuable.
And then I think even for folks who aren't on the tour or who aren't presenting work, it's helpful to see how we talk about work. It took me a long time to realize that there's people who look at photography, but they just sort of look at it, but they're not capable of really talking about it or discussing it. Or it sounds almost elitist to say that, but in a way, that's how it is, right? It took me as a photographer a while to learn to speak about work in general, like photography, right? And there's different ways you can speak. You can speak in historical context. You can speak in, we mentioned here some of the things like complementary colors and tension and abstraction and things like that. But there are lots of ways to talk about work. And it can be difficult sometimes to know where to start. If you're not used to having that conversation, especially with photography, a lot of times people think, oh, I'm a photographer, I don't need words, I tell it in pictures. But the fact is a lot, and again, the photographers are all laughing. I can see you laughing because we get asked again and again to be able to speak about our work. And I'm always surprised at the amount of writing I have to do about my work and the amount of speaking I have to do about my work. It's sort of like, wow, I thought I was picking up a camera and being behind that. But the reality of it is I have to write a lot and I have to speak a lot to my work and to other people's work now as well. So it's kind of interesting to see that. And I think any kind of studio tour, any kind of where you can meet folks who are just walking through is very beneficial, because you really see what the public values in art and what the perceptions are, and just what, and it makes you more, it makes you able to articulate more about what you're doing. And sometimes that can help you formulate your ideas better, right? If you are a more articulate artist, you don't necessarily have to use all the art speak words, but if you are able to say, well, this is what I'm doing, this is my approach, this is my technique, and you can sort of gel it down into something that is, easily communicated, that does sometimes help people understand your work better. So I think it helps.
So can help just when you approach a subject. If you have the concepts in mind, then you get a better idea of where you want to, I don't know, position the camera, what concepts you want to incorporate into the shot. And I have found that recently, as I've begun to think about these ideas and work them in fact, doing the work on the book, which had me get out every day and do shots and shoot all the time. And, oh, I got to put this in because they want to see that, and all that kind of thing, was very helpful in sort of teaching me, or letting me teach myself how to visualize things.
Yeah, Ansel Adams talked about that. He said, and I'm going to get the quote wrong, of course, but I think he said something like, you can't take a clear photo of a blurry concept.
Right.
Something along those
Something
lines.
along those lines.
Yeah.
I remember back when I was studying the zone system.
Yeah, yeah. And that's that's a quote that always stuck with me, even though I can't quite remember it right now off the top of my head, but it's very true, right? The more clear your concept becomes, and the more you talk about it, the more clear it becomes. And the more clear it becomes, the better the image, the more deliberate your images are, and the more focused your images are. And it's less about scattershot and less about like, oh, let me, a lot of people think they pick up a camera and they sort of bump into photographs like a Roomba, they just sort of blindly go, oh, that looks good. That looks good. Right. And then as you're able to talk about your work more and formulate your ideas and articulate what you're doing, you suddenly turn from a Roomba to like a heat-seeking missile, right? You get exactly what you want, or closer to what you want. And I think it really helps your work. And Clay is, I talk with my hands a lot, so.
Well, I'm sitting on mine, so I don't.
Yeah, I should. I'm going to knock my computer off my box again, so I better be careful. It hasn't gone flying too badly, but it's teetering on the edge. So I've been, I've been doing a lot of these Zoom calls, right? That's another thing, I'm learning how to do Zoom calls. But before I was kind of like this, right? Because my computer, you were sort of looking up my nose, I guess. And now so I raised my computer. So now I'm sort of typing like this, but my computer's a little up higher. So hopefully you can see my head a little bit better. It's kind of funny. I have a Zoom box now, which I never thought in my days I'd come to have. Of all the things, but.
The things we learn through COVID.
Yeah, the things we've done, kind of funny. But yeah, so I think what's going to happen is the folks at Big Medium will be putting these talks up. And, like I said, my guess is it'll probably extend into March, April, even depending on how it goes. But I wouldn't be surprised if our talks don't stay up for a while. So I plan to use the recording if I can, and I'll share it with the group, and hopefully we'll put it on the NAPfS website at some point.
Yes,
Sure,
if you haven't gone back to this, I haven't gone back today, but I went back yesterday. Oh, there's a lot more. Gosh, yeah, studio tours, all sorts of the various ones that have been recorded. So the site has really filled up from when I looked at it before last weekend. So it was pretty empty. I was kind of discouraged and disappointed. Now it's really full of all sorts of stuff. Definitely want to go look at it again.
Cool.
Yes, they filled it up, and they took some of our suggestions. I called out the fact that the live videos were being kind of buried in the virtual tab, and they made a separate tab for the live versus the live stream versus the recorded content. So that sort of helped us a little bit, I think. I know yesterday I hosted a women who art panel, and it was really well received. Carol was there, and a few folks from the group. Deborah Cole was there, and Mary was there. And so it was a great little panel discussion, but we had gotten some attention from the folks at Big Medium. So I think that will be getting, and that's how I think we're getting editing skills. So they may give us a video editor for some of the work that we're doing. Some of my live sessions may get edited and put up in different places across Big Medium. So,
Cool.
you know, they've been very supportive and very helpful. You know, at one point I was really upset because I thought, oh, we're not getting anybody on our Zoom calls, and they sort of said, we'll help, we'll do, you know, and they've been very supportive, very helpful. So, and no reason to think they'll not continue that process. And I do think I actually have to say, some of the work on the Austin Studio Tour site is just astounding to me. Austin has always been an art community that's very strong. We have great work. We're not always professional in terms of promoting ourselves. And I'm guilty of that, as many others. We don't always put our work out there and get it and sell it and whatnot, but we do a lot of great work. And this year is no exception. Some of the work I'm seeing on the site, and I haven't had enough time to really dig into it myself because I'm on the tour and doing a lot of work, you know, my own work. But what I've been able to break off and see has just been incredible work. I'm really honored to be a part of the tour, and I'm really going to enjoy the upcoming long weekend. I'm going to really enjoy going through some of the material and really looking at what some of the folks are doing. There's just a lot of creativity in Austin, and a lot of people do a lot of great work. So, you know, it's something that I know a lot of us are photographers, and we think, oh, well, they're artists, they're doing sculptures and things, but really you can get inspired by what they're doing. And I would encourage people to spend some time with what's out there, because you can really get a lot of ideas and really see some of the things that folks are doing and really enjoy the work. So, you know, thanks to Big Medium again. I can't thank them enough. And really, it's been a great, you know, it ended up being a great tour, even if it kind of got off to a little rough start. And of course, we all would love it if COVID just went away.
That would be nice.
Here, just get out of my life already. But in light of the fact that it's not going anywhere, we made the most of the tour being virtual and doing what we could. So
He wants to hear what you say.
just get out. You know, I wish I could just kick it in the
You know,
anatomy.
a minute ago you mentioned the people that you were interested in seeing, and I looked at some of those, and I don't know, I can't read my own writing, but maybe a Rama Tiru.
Rama Tiru, yes.
Yeah, I really like her stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, she's great. She used to have a gallery in Austin. She was a gallerist for a long time, and now I believe she's teaching at ACC in the art department. But don't quote me on that. She might not still be teaching. I'm not 100% sure. But she's been a teacher, and she had a small gallery that was sort of like around the corner from Central Market on 38th Street. She had a tiny little gallery, but she used to have she'd have these big parties, and we'd all go in the parking lot and hang out. It was a lot of fun. So every time I see her, I think, oh, like we're going to go hang out in the parking lot and enjoy the art. Because it really was, you know, she had a tiny little gallery, but it got a lot of people, and it actually sold a lot of work through her gallery at one point, because she used to get a lot of people, even though we had to stand out in the parking lot. It was always a lot of fun. So yeah, so I don't know if she's going to start another gallery up, or what her plans are. But I know she always does some really interesting work. There's someone out also, there's another photographer she has a ranch, and she's setting up work like on her ranch and allowing people to sort of drive through it. It's really interesting. And then there's other people that are doing stuff in their garage. Like they've set up these things in their garage, and you give them a time, like you check in, and then they go in their house and you go in their garage, and then, you know, so they're social distance. And then what I've been calling the peeping Tom art, which I think is hysterical, right? They put stuff in their front window, and you sort of go, oh, look at that. You know,
I'm gonna go Sky Cat.
You know, it's like there's
somewhere.
Tom art is, it cracks me. The whole idea of it just makes me giggle, but it's a great way to see the art. You know, so props to people who are doing that, and you know, I think it's great. And like
You know, a lot of the artists have kind of gotten priced out of, you know, I mean, Flatbed, you know, I guess they're turning into condos or whatever, but some of the Bohm studios and a lot of the artists pretty much were getting priced out of their galleries in what used to be, you know, very affordable and now very rapidly gentrifying East Austin. And a lot of them are doing very creative things with, you know, like you said, with their garage. And that's kind of, you know, become an ongoing thing for a lot of them. And as awful as COVID is being, I think that there will be many things that come out of people having had to do things virtually. Like next year, I can imagine East will be in person, but I imagine there will also be a fair amount of virtual stuff that is going on as well. And that you'll be able to continue to see it rather than, oh my gosh, I couldn't see everything in 2 weekends and now it's gone. You know, you'll be able to revisit and to be able to actually see more than you could have been driving around to.
And
So
since we're sort of off the topic at this point, I can sort of talk freely on this. So a lot of people originally there was Bohm Studios where Big Medium was located, and that was sort of an area where they sort of reclaimed and said, hey, let's make this art studios. And it was always really sort of low rent because nobody, you know, it wasn't gentrified, right? And so artists moved in there and it was great. It was a great experience, right? And then they said, oh, we need to organize all the artists and have a big place where all the artists can get support, right? Well, what happened was they opened Canopy, right? And then that was good for a year or two, but then the prices just went through the roof. I mean, you couldn't get a studio in Canopy for under, you know, $1,000 a month. And for artists, that's really a hardship. And a lot of people were jokingly referring to it as Cashapy because it was like, you know, you couldn't afford a studio in there, right?
a
And
full
so
paycheck.
yeah, exactly. And then what was happening was East was turning into carpetbaggery because what was happening was people were renting and subletting places in Canopy just so they could be on the East tour. And so you were getting all these artists that nobody heard of that were suddenly like, you know, John Smith, great artist in East. And it's like, who the heck is he, right? Like someone from Baltimore just moved in for a week so they could get, you know, cash in on the studio tour. And the local artists were really getting shut out of East. And I noticed this year in the movie and in some of what the East was doing, there was a big push for sort of inclusion and diversity. Another thing is there's people of color getting more recognized, which is great. But also just the idea that we might be able to include people who aren't the carpetbaggers of East, right? But maybe the real artists may be able to get a toehold back into the studio tour and be able to say, hey, I'm living and working in Austin. Just because I'm not in Canopy doesn't mean I'm not an artist doing valid work. And I hope that will happen from this. I hope they sort of address that because now what's happening is there's sort of an anti-Canopy movement where people are trying to start another studio space that would be cheaper and more accessible versus the Canopy, which is the, you know, there's the people who have, and I feel guilty saying this because I am one of them, but there are people who sort of have day jobs who paint in Canopy, the gentleman painters, as some people call them, and they can afford to spend, you know, $1,000 a month on a Canopy studio, and they can afford to buy all the most expensive paints, and they just paint on weekends, right? Versus the people who are trying to scrap together stuff and paint and do what they can, and they're not professional artists, but full-time artists, Austin residents and whatnot, and they're really getting shut out of some of the artist opportunities, and even of the city, right? Because they're gentrifying the whole East Side. And there's no place for these people to go. So I hope they can reconcile that and get some good representation on the East Tour in the future. And maybe the video, you know, maybe this COVID will help in that regard. Maybe we can do some virtual things going forward. Now that they figured out how to work the virtual platforms and whatnot, maybe next year they'll be able to do a combination. That would be great. You know, I've always been sort of an East outlier in that I was sort of a carpetbagger in some ways because I never kept a studio. but I always had friends who were like on Bohm. But the East people also really liked me because I did a lot of volunteer work, right? I knew I was sort of a carpetbagging, and I tried to help the local artists. And so I was kind of a friendly carpetbagger, if you will, if there's such a thing, right? I was sort of telling, they sort of accepted me, even though I was sort of a carpetbagger, because I helped. I was more helpful as opposed to someone who, there are some artists who just come from Baltimore for East, and they jack up their prices and they come for 2 weeks and they just look to cash in. And it's really sad when I see that, because like, that's not really what Austin is about. But, I guess they have to do that as part of the tour. So it is what it is, but hopefully, and Big Medium is really trying to help support all the artists, even the carpetbaggers from Baltimore or whatnot, to help us all. And I think that is the way to approach it, right? What's good for the art community will help everybody, not just the folks from Baltimore who are well-to-do.
Maybe they
You
can
don't like
figure out how
Baltimore.
to charge them out-of-state tuition.
Yeah, that's what they need to do, out of state or something. I don't know, some subletting fee. I'm not sure. They've tried. They're trying to get creative with it, but it's a little hard to muster.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
No, I was just asking what you had against Baltimore.
Well,
Besides the country and western song.
It's just, there's one particular artist that I swear he shows up like 1 week a year for East. And then he doesn't even have he's like sublets a sublet in the, in one of the studios. And it's like, he's figured out how to pay the minimum amount of money to be in the East catalog. And that's all he does. He doesn't even, like, I think last year he had a representative from his studio. That means he didn't even show up, right? He put himself in the catalog and sublet and stuck some paintings in like a corner in Canopy and said, hey, I'm on the Austin studio tour. I'm in the East Austin studio tour. And everybody was like, what? And some of the people like Eve Larson, who, I don't know if you know her, but she's been a painter in Austin for ages, was shut out because, she was in West and, and people were just like, how can you kick Eve out and put this guy in, and I don't want to get into the details of it, but, we were all sort of like, what the heck is going on? And they're trying.
The resume.
Yeah, they're trying. They try to, it's by review. You do have to have work of a certain level to get in. Eve is definitely of the level to get in, but she was knocked out because of geography, not because of her ability. She's a wonderful painter. I'll just say that. But just some of the things that have happened maybe in the past, we sort of just scratch our heads and go, how did that happen? And then there's my other favorite one is the people, I call them the shoebox Canopy artists, right? Because you'll get like 52 artists will rent one studio in Canopy, and they're all like guest of such and such studios, and there's 50 people, and it's like, they've all rented a shoe. Yeah, like everyone's got a painting this big, Well, that's one way around the financial restrictions, I guess, right? Like, good on you, but
Right.
It makes it a little confusing because it's like, well, there's these 50 people. So, the things that happen as part of East, I shouldn't talk, but well, we should end it here. We've done enough chit chatting. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being part of the Austin Studio Tour. Thanks, Big Medium. Thanks, NAPfS and all the photographers who shared your work. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you later.
Thank
Bye.
you. Good to see everyone.
Bye.
Bye.